The stars above Earth didn't blink anymore. Not because they were gone, but because Earth had forgotten how to look up. When the Galactic Order arrived 70 years ago, humanity stood still for the first time in its violent, blood-soaked history. They came with grandeur, with ships that bent gravity and words dipped in silk. No invasion, no fire, just treaties, technology, and the promise of peace. Humanity, worn down by world wars, nuclear standoffs, climate collapse, and the steady erosion of hope, said yes. In a single generation, Earth's weapons were decommissioned. The militaries disbanded. The intelligence agencies defunded. Orbital weapon platforms scrapped and buried beneath the oceans. They called it the Integration Accord. The media celebrated it as humanity's final evolution, a war-torn species finally cured of its own madness. But deep in the Arctic silence, where wind still howled over ice fields untouched by alien boots, a lone man sat beside a flickering fire, staring into nothing. He hadn't signed the accord. He hadn't turned in his weapons. He hadn't surrendered. The men who trained him were ghosts. The program that made him was erased. But he remained, a remnant of the old world. His name had been classified, buried. The galaxy didn't know him. Earth pretended he never existed. But in the forgotten Black Book files of Earth's Final War Division, he was known only as Wolverine, the Spark. The fire crackled low as the emergency radio chirped once. Then again, the man didn't move. Not at first. He hadn't heard that sound in 23 years. His fingers, thick with scarred tissue, reached toward the rusted console bolted into the cabin's wall. His touch was gentle, like waking a child. Directive broadcast. Level 9. Earth override code Aegis 7 Alpha. He froze. That was an IF military black code. From before the Accord, the voice continued, broken, terrified. Galactic Enforcement Division has initiated youth seizure protocol. Conscription targets, ages 7 through 13, beginning in 3 urban hubs. No resistance permitted. All planetary defense deactivated by order of the Accord. Silence followed. Then one last whisper. Please, if anyone's still out there, they're taking our kids. The past never dies. The man stood up slowly, his body groaned beneath decades of scar tissue, reinforced joints, and chemical memories that burned like coals in his bones. He reached under the floorboards. The old war chest hissed open. Inside, a matte black combat suit slept in silence, each plate shaped not for defense, but for killing. Blood-stained gloves, a monofilament war sword folded into itself like a metallic serpent, and a datapad locked with retinal encryption. He stared at the gear for a long time. His hands shook, not from fear, but from the storm behind his ribs, the one he buried when Oath chose peace. He put on the armor like a second skin. The sword hissed into shape in his hand. Outside, the wind howled across the frozen horizon. Inside, the Wolverine breathed deep, for the first time in decades, and smiled. Elsewhere, New Moscow Indoctrination Hub. Darian Voss was 10 years old. He watched as they dragged his older sister, Lyra, through the cold hanger by her hair. They'd come 2 days earlier, galactic enforcers in bone-white armor, their voices robotic, their faces featureless. No warning, no choice, just seizure tags implanted into the back of children's necks, and a number burned onto their arms. His parents had begged, pleaded. They were shot in front of him. Now Lyra was being sent off-world, labeled combat apt. She was 13. Darian's number was next. He stood in line with a dozen other children, none of them speaking. One girl had wet herself. Another boy just kept whispering his mother's name over and over. The enforcer overseeing them didn't blink. It didn't need to. It just turned its head toward the wind as snow began to fall. And then, a scream, not from the children, from the guard tower. Metal crunched. Fire bloomed. Alarm shrieked. Darian looked up just in time to see a figure drop from the rooftop, slicing the enforcer in half mid-fall. The others screamed. Darian didn't. He just stared. The man moved like a shadow, low to the ground, smooth, controlled. One hand held a sword that steamed in the cold, glowing faintly at the edge. The other dragged the second enforcer by the throat, using its body like a shield as bullets ricocheted off. The figure stepped through the haze. His armor wasn't galactic. It was older, Wilder, human, eyes black with fury, expression calm as ice. He tossed the enforcer's corpse aside like a bag of trash. Then he turned to the children. "Who's Darien Voss?" he said, voice low but thunderous. Darien raised his trembling hand. The man walked forward and knelt before him. "You're coming with me," he said. "Where's your sister?" Darien pointed toward the hangar, where screams now echoed. The man stood and drew the blade. "Stay behind me. Don't look away." The twist, rebirth in blood. The hangar was a war zone. Galactic troops tried to form ranks. Their bone armor clacked as they shouted in 100 tongues. They didn't realize the mistake they'd made. They thought Earth had no killers left. They were wrong. Wolverine moved like a machine forged in fire, every motion precise, lethal. Heads fell, spines shattered. The blade tore through armor like silk, leaving smoking trails of cauterized death. Lyra, chained and surrounded, screamed, until he landed beside her, crushed 3 guards with a single spin, and sliced a cuff from her wrist without nicking skin. She looked at him with wide eyes. "Who are you?" He looked down at her, at the blood on his armor, the fire behind him, the dozens of corpses already cooling. And for the first time in 20 years, he said his name out loud. "Wolverine." Then he lifted his blade again. "Let's go save the rest." Final scene. The man the galaxy forgot. By nightfall, the indoctrination center was silent. No children remained in chains. No guards remained breathing. Wolverine stood atop the ruined gate, the red sun setting behind him, sword strapped to his back. The children huddled around fire barrels, wrapped in salvaged blankets. Some cried, some slept, most just stared at him. Lyra stood beside him, arms around her brother. "Why'd you come back?" she asked. He didn't answer at first. He looked out toward the horizon, where 3 more centers like this one still operated. He turned his head just slightly, because Earth forgot what it was. I didn't. He looked up at the sky, stars cold and distant. "I'm going to remind them." The screams echoed long after the gates fell. Not the screams of soldiers, not of pain, but of something far more terrifying. Hope. Hope is louder than bombs when you've lived your whole life in chains. And the children, once silent, once broken, were screaming for the first time in years. Because they had seen him. Because blood still dripped from his blade. Because something ancient and dangerous had awakened, and it was on their side. Opening scene. 3 hours later, Facility 77, lower bunkhold. Darien Voss clutched a rusted pipe, hands shaking. They were hidden behind an old storage locker in the barracks sublevel. Dozens of them, kids too young to hold knives, too old to keep crying. The walls trembled as explosions echoed above. "Is he still alive?" a boy whispered beside him. Darien didn't answer. He couldn't. He could still see it, the way the man moved. Not like a soldier. Not like anything from the Empire. He moved like a storm with eyes. Controlled. Purposeful. Ruthless. He wasn't saving the children because it was noble. He was doing it because someone had crossed a line. And now the galaxy was bleeding for it. Meanwhile, upper hangar, Facility 77. The corpse count reached 64 before the Enforcer Commander triggered the lockdown. Heavy gates slammed shut. Plasma turrets unfolded from the ceilings. Drones hissed alive like insects in the dark. The air smelled like oil and death. In the center of the hangar, Wolverine stood alone. His breath fogged in the cold. Blood steamed on his sword. The voice that came over the intercom was sterile, robotic. "Surrender. You are outnumbered. Your species is not cleared full combat status. This engagement violates the accord." He looked up, smiling faintly. "Good." Then he moved. Rising tension. Combat sequence. He sprinted into gunfire. Turrets tracked him. Too slow. Drones launched. Too wide. He slammed his blade into the floor and used it as a vault pole, launching himself into the air. Landed hard on the first drone. Crushed it beneath his boots. Flipped midspin and cleaved the second in half before his feet touched steel. Plasma bolts screamed past his head. One grazed his shoulder. He didn't slow down. Every movement was precise. Every kill was intentional. He wasn't fighting for Earth. Not yet. He was fighting for the children. Meanwhile, lower barracks, children's refuge. Darian's heart leapt as the lights flickered. Another explosion, closer this time. Then a sound none of them expected. Footsteps, heavy, measured, coming down the corridor. Some of the children screamed. Darian didn't. He stood up, stepped past the rusted pipe, and peeked into the hole. A silhouette approached through the smoke. Not tall like the enforcers, not slow like a drone. It was him, covered in blood, breathing hard, left arm limp, but alive. Wolverine stepped into the room and scanned the frightened faces. "Everyone on your feet," he growled. "We're leaving." Midpoint twist. The trap. They didn't make it 5 steps before the walls split open. It wasn't enforcers. It was worse. A Titan-class detainer, 2 stories tall, its arms like wrecking balls, its torso a walking furnace. They'd buried it beneath the facility. A last resort. A myth. A war crime on 4 legs. And now they had unleashed it. Wolverine turned to the children. "You run. Now." But Darian started. "Go." They ran. He faced the Titan alone. It scanned him. Human combatant, anomaly classified, termination protocol engaged. It charged. He didn't dodge. He dove into the hit, used the momentum, planted a grenade between its ribs, was thrown like a rag doll into a steel beam. The grenade exploded. Smoke. Silence. Then the sound of metal creaking. The Titan limped out of the crater. Still alive. But now, so was he. Cinematic beat. The legend lives. Wolverine crawled from the wreckage, one eye swollen shut, ribs shattered. But he stood, blood dripping from his lip. He looked up at the beast. He didn't have grenades left, or strength. But he had one thing the Empire never counted for. Memory. He knew this model. He'd trained against it, and he remembered its one design flaw. The coolant vent beneath the left shoulder. He dashed forward as the Titan roared. It slammed a fist down. He rolled, came up fast, plunged his blade into the vent. The Titan shrieked, a scream of metal and heat, and then its core detonated. The blast swallowed him whole. Aftermath. The children wait. The children crouched outside the facility wall, the tundra wind freezing their tears. Darian stood at the edge, staring at the smoking crater where the building used to be. He didn't speak. He couldn't. He just watched. Watched the smoke. Watched the crater. Then, a hand. A black-gloved hand emerged from the fire. And then he rose. Burned. Bleeding. But smiling. "Who's ready?" he rasped. "To go home." Ending beat. The chains are breaking. By midnight, Facility 77 was gone. Wolverine walked at the head of the children, Lyra and Darian at his side. The cold bit their skin, but they didn't shiver. Not anymore. They weren't prisoners. They weren't property. They were witnesses to a story the Empire said no longer existed. Earth was pacified. No, Earth was waiting. And somewhere deep in the void, across hundreds of worlds, in command centers and palaces and warships, someone was watching this unfold. And they were terrified, because the Wolverine wasn't just alive. He was hunting. The blood didn't freeze. It sizzled, even in sub-zero wind, even in the white silence of the tundra. It hissed where it splattered, because it came from a body too alive to die and a blade too old to forget war. The snow was painted in streaks of steam and viscera. Children watched from behind shattered walls, eyes wide and silent. They'd seen monsters. They'd seen executioners. Now they were watching a man become one. And somewhere, far above the sky, the Tyrants finally realized Earth hadn't been pacified. It had been hibernating. Scene 1, 12 kilometers from Facility 77. The snow fell heavier now. Wolverine marched through it, blood crusted across his armor. Darian walked beside him, limping, trying to carry a younger boy who kept passing out from the cold. Lyra moved behind, her jaw clenched, eyes flicking back at the crater behind them. No one spoke, until they reached the ridge. From there, they could see the next facility, 77A. Its towers jutted out of the ice like the ribs of a buried god. Drones zipped between them. Transports hummed near the hangar pads. Wolverine crouched. Darian crept beside him. "Are we hitting it now?" No, Wolverine's voice was flat. Not until I know what's inside. You can't go alone. Wolverine turned to him, and for a brief second, something strange flickered in his eye. Something like respect. I'm not going alone, he said. You're coming with me. Scene 2. The Inside Truth. Facility 77A wasn't a re-education center. It was a forge. Children weren't indoctrinated here. They were stripped, cut, implanted, burned. Soldiers didn't walk its halls. Scientists did. And in the deep cryo vaults beneath the main structure, a dozen figures floated in glass tanks, half-grown, half-human, tagged with serial numbers. Darian gagged. Lyra stared in horror. They are growing soldiers, she whispered. From Earth's kids. No, Wolverine muttered. He stepped forward, tapping the glass of one tank. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched. They are growing replacements. Clones, augmented with alien tissue, drained of memory, conscience, identity. Earth's future, stolen and rewritten. The speaker above them clicked on, and the voice that came through was not mechanical. It was cold, sharp, regal. You are trespassing on sovereign soil, aberrant. They all froze, because the voice didn't echo from the halls. It echoed from behind them. They turned, and saw her. Scene 3. Enter the High Enforcer. Mario, the highest-ranked enforcer of the Tyrant Order, 8 feet tall, skin of pale obsidian laced with chrome. Bone armor fused directly into her flesh, forming a living exosuit. Her eyes burned with ultraviolet fire. A curved blade, almost ceremonial in design, hung at her side, humming faintly as if feeding on the air. She didn't draw it. She didn't need to, because the entire room stopped breathing the moment she entered. Darian stepped back. Lyra reached for a wrench, all she had. Wolverine stepped forward. You the architect of this hell? He asked. She tilted her head slightly. I am the spine of it. Then her smile darkened. And you are the last relic of a savage world. Scene 4. The Clash. She moved first. One blink, and she was in front of him, her blade kissing his ribs. Wolverine deflected. Barely. The impact sent him skidding back, boots carving trenches in the steel. She followed, graceful, merciless. Every strike was elegant death. Every dodge a brush with extinction. Wolverine blocked with forearms, shoulder plates, even his bare hands when necessary. He bled fast, but he gave back more. They moved like wolves made of metal and memory, slashing through corridors, breaking glass, shattering lights. Lyra screamed as Mario hurled Wolverine through a support column. He landed hard, didn't rise. Scene 5. The Twist. Mario approached slowly. No rush. She could already smell victory. You are obsolete, she whispered, raising her sword. This galaxy no longer fears humans. She plunged a blade into his chest, straight through the armor, into the floor beneath. Darian cried out. Lyra lunged, was hurled against the wall. Mario turned to them. Return to your assigned roles, or die like him. She walked away, and Wolverine didn't move. Scene 6. Silence after storm. The corridors went still. Only flickering lights. Distant hums. Blood in the air. Darian crawled toward him, sobbing, grabbed his hand. It was cold. Lyra collapsed beside them, shaking her head. His not breathing. He was gone. The legend that haunted the Empire ended in a forgotten hallway. Scene 7. A voice on the wind. Fire above the facility. In orbit, a Tyrant command ship hovered silently. Admiral Vroth watched the feed. The death. The children kneeling in blood. He turned to his advisors. Is it confirmed? Yes. Heart ceased. Brain flatlined. The Wolverine is dead. A moment of silence. Then laughter. Galactic broadcast began almost immediately. The last human war specimen has been eliminated. Peace is restored. The integration holds. Scene 8. Final shot. The ember beneath the ashes. But they made one mistake. They didn't remove the body. And buried deep in the marrow of his bones, dormant nanite stowed. Triggered by blood loss. By neural collapse. By the final emergency protocol buried in his spine. Something ancient. Something human. A command whispered from his dying brain into a machine older than the Accord. Revive on failure. His heart twitched, his fingers curled, and somewhere, beneath the pain, a thought formed. Not rage, not vengeance. Something more dangerous. Awakening. Final line. The snow hadn't stopped falling. But under Facility 77A, behind steel and blood and silence, Wolverine opened his eyes, and the galaxy started counting its hours. Dead men don't wake up. That's the rule. That's the truth the galaxy clings to. Neat, clean, final. They broadcasted his body across every quadrant, hung him in orbit like a trophy. The last human war beast. The last threat. Slain. Silenced. Burned into memory. But some things don't die when the blood stops flowing. Some things keep breathing in the dark, because rage doesn't live in the heart. It lives in the marrow, and Earth's monster wasn't buried. He was buried alive. Scene 1, orbit over Earth, Cradle Vex prison station. They suspended his body above the docking ring. Chains sunk into his arms, ribs shattered, armor scorched black. One eye swollen shut, sword missing. To the galaxy, he was a relic finally erased. To Admiral Vroth, who watched from the bridge, he was a lesson. This is what happens, Vroth sneered, when a primitive planet dares defy the Accord. His officers nodded. They didn't see the twitch. Scene 2, in the cold. Inside the body, silence. The heart hadn't beat in 17 hours. The brain was dark. And then, one pulse. Not natural, not biological. A jolt, triggered by his own DNA. In his spine, beneath the scar tissue, something ancient awoke. Project Umbra, an unauthorized bioengineered failsafe, developed by Earth's Final War Division, injected only into one man. The Wolverine. Revive on failure. Sequence initiated. Nanites flooded his veins. Bones relined. Blood red-boiled. Memory surged. And in his skull, behind the scarred thoughts and forgotten wars, one word formed. Breathe. Scene 3, resurrection. His fingers twitched. His neck cracked. His left eye opened. He looked down. Chains. Steel cuffs. Orbit. A void of stars around him. Then he looked up. Toward Earth. Toward home. He didn't scream. Didn't roar. Just ripped the chains free with a grunt that sounded like thunder rolling through space. The sirens on Cradle Vex didn't even finish wailing before he'd vanished inside the station's ventilation system. The guard scrambled, but he was already behind them. Scene 4, hallways afire. Wolverine moved like smoke and death. No weapons, no armor, just his fists. The first guard died with a crushed windpipe. The second lost an arm before he screamed. The third managed to say he was alive. Before he lost his skull, alarms flooded the station. In the control room, Admiral Vroth froze as a feed from cell block 6 flickered. Static. Blood. Nothing. He turned to his officers. Seal the armory. Too late. The lights went out. Scene 5. The Sword Reborn. He found a forge room in the center of the station, racks of confiscated weapons from a dozen species. But he ignored the blasters, the plasma, the alien steel. He went to the broken fragment of his own sword, charred and bent, and rebuilt it with his hands. Welded with flame, sharpened with patience, and soaked, once again, in his own blood. The hilt clicked into place. The old hum returned. The sword was alive again. So was he. Scene 6, Earth broadcast. At 2:19 Universal Time Coordinated, the galactic net trembled. Every screen, every comms tower, every station. Hijacked. The image, a dark room. A man in black armor, face shadowed, sword on his back. Behind him, smoke, fire, silence. His voice, cold as war. This is Earth's final warning. Return our children. Dismantle your camps. Leave our soil. Or I bring extinction. You killed the peace the moment you touched our blood. Now I kill everything else. He stepped closer. And if you're wondering who speaks for Earth, my name is Wolverine. Scene 7, reactions across the galaxy. Panic. The Dominion Council erupted into screams. Admirals demanded troop deployments. Governors issued planetary blackouts. On Earth, Underground networks screamed to life. Former Black Ops teams stirred in bunkers. Old soldiers rose from obscurity. The galaxy had built itself on one belief. Earth had no monsters left. They had just loaned. Too late, that one was still breathing. And he was angry. Scene 8, Vengeance begins. Wolverine didn't run. He piloted the entire prison station back to Earth's orbit. Not to hide, to launch. Cradle Vex became his flagship, a ghost ship with weapons reactivated and systems overridden. Its crew, dead or fleeing in escape pods. He uploaded his own protocols, rewired the AI, hard-coded one destination. HFY Prime, the seat of tyrant governance in the Orion Arm, the world where the Accord had been signed, the place where Earth had been shackled. He was going to burn it. Scene 9, Darien watches. Back on Earth, Darien sat in a refugee bunker beneath what remained of Facility 77. Lyra tended to the wounded, face grim, but Darien stared at the screen, watching the broadcast on a dusty console. He didn't cry, didn't smile. He just whispered, "He's alive." A child beside him, barely 7, asked, "Is he coming back?" Darien didn't answer right away. Then he stood and said, with fire in his chest, "No, he's going forward." Final scene, in the void. Wolverine stood at the command deck of Cradle Vex. Alone, steady, ahead of him, the stars blurred. Warp engines roared. Behind him, silence. He looked out at the void and saw the future. It wasn't peace. It wasn't hope. It was reckoning. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. The station jolted, and with a scream of steel, Cradle Vex entered the jump gate. Final line. They buried him in orbit. Now he's coming back from the stars. And this time, he's bringing the fire. The day began with silence. No sirens. No alarms. No marching boots. Just a stillness that made generals sweat and tyrants feel cold in their gold-plated thrones. Because silence meant one thing. He'd arrived. And there's no defense against a ghost who already died once. No protocol for vengeance wrapped in a human frame. No shield against the thing Earth buried and called Wolverine. Scene 1, orbit over HFY Prime. The arrival. The sky over the tyrant capital fractured like glass. A split in space. A gate torn open. Out came a prison. Cradle Vex, now a warship, bristling with turned weapons and stolen vengeance, descended like a falling god. No fleet escorted it. None dared. Its signal, black. Its owner, classified. Its commander, unlisted. But every tyrant on HFY knew what it meant. Because on every screen, every tower, every planet-wide channel, one face. That armor, that sword, Wolverine. And then, the sky screamed. Scene 2, Invasion of One. He didn't wait for war. He dropped from orbit in a fireball of steel, crashing through the upper domes of HFY's central defense grid, landing like a meteor into their core reactor zone. Explosions followed. Systems collapsed. Tyrant guards scrambled with rifles and mechs. But he moved through them like a storm of ash and blood. Every step left corpses. Every swing of his blade carved futures off the bone. Plasma rounds bounced. Tanks folded. Drones screamed. And still, he advanced. One man. A million reasons. No mercy. Scene 3. The Parliament falls. In the high spire of HFY's ruling caste, Chancellor Awoke stood before a war council of 80 planetary representatives. Each one panicked. Shouting. Gesturing. Arguing. "Is just one man," one cried. "Is a human weaponized against reason," another snapped. Awoke slammed his claws on the podium. "Silence. We end this now. Initiate Protocol Sigma." A red button. A final failsafe, a planetary purge. But when Awoke pressed it, nothing. The screen blinked. One sentence appeared. "Nice try." W. Awoke turned. Behind him, the window exploded, and the Wolverine walked in. Scene 4. The twist. He didn't come alone. The tyrant had always feared Earth's monsters. But they forgot Earth didn't birth just one. While Wolverine gutted the Parliament, orbit shimmered again. Dozens of human ships decloaked. Black, silent, built from forgotten tech and war-forged secrets. commanded by ex-soldiers, rogue AI, old resistance leaders. At their head, Darien, now armored, his voice crisp with fury. "Permission to burn, sir," he asked through comms. Wolverine paused mid-strike, lighted up. And then, Earth's fire returned to the stars. Scene 5, Planetfall. The ground war didn't last long. Earth's strike teams moved like phantoms. Lyra led a unit through the slave pens, freeing children the Accord swore didn't exist. Juno, the sniper once imprisoned, eliminated every orbital gunner with one bullet each. Darien stood in the Capitol Square and gave the order. For every child they chained, break 10 of theirs. Civilians weren't touched, but every military center, breeding complex, propaganda tower, and ruling palace, burned, broadcast live, across every quadrant, just like they had shown Wolverine's corpse. Only now, it was him screaming. Scene 6, The Boy on the Throne. Wolverine stood alone in the center of Gautier's old throne chamber. Blood on the walls, ash in the air. At his feet, Uvex gurgled through a crushed jaw. You're just an animal." Wolverine knelt, his voice low. "No, I'm a father." He pointed to a mural, one that once showed her surrender. It now crackled with fire. Behind Wolverine, a child stepped forward, 7 years old. Same boy who asked Darien if the monster would come home. He climbed the steps, sat on the throne, looked at the tyrant, and said one word: "Burn." Scene 7, a name written in flame. When Earth's fleet departed, Gautier was in the capital. It was a warning. The sky was black, the city's ruins. The Accord dissolved, tyrant species scattered, most in hiding. Some begged for peace, some tried to resist. But no one forgot the name. Wolverine. No title, no rank, no medals. Just a man forged in silence, who returned from death not to reclaim glory, but to make sure no human child would ever be chained again. Scene 8, 1 year later, Earth rebuilt. The skies over Earth were clean. Its surface healed, slow, but breathing. Cities rose. Families returned. Graves were honored. In the mountain shadows, a school opened, not for soldiers, for survivors. Children trained to read, not to hide. And outside that school, a statue, a man in black armor, not holding a weapon, but holding a child. The plaque read, "When the galaxy forgot who we were, one man reminded them." He didn't come to conquer. He came to finish the war they started. Project Wolverine, humanity endures. Final scene, in the forest, deep in the woods, far from cities and memorials, a small cabin stood by the river. Inside, Wolverine carved a piece of wood. Simple, quiet, focused. A knock came at the door. He didn't reach for a weapon, didn't flinch, just opened it. Darien stood there, older, scarred, smiling. World's quieter now. Wolverine nodded. "You missed the fire." A long silence. Then, "No, I missed the quiet before it." Darien handed him a datapad. "Council wants a name, a banner, something to call the peace we're building." Wolverine read the screen, paused, then typed, "Never again." Final line. They tried to bury him, tried to kill the myth, tried to erase Earth's fire. But monsters like him don't vanish. They wait until the galaxy forgets. And then they rise, because when peace dies screaming, humanity sends a Wolverine.